Dimension W, Episode 11, The Lost Genesis. Now, I'm pretty sure we're getting to probably the last two episodes, unfortunately, if Episode 12 really is the last episode. I'm pretty sure this is, the end of the first season. But I think this is a cool episode. Once again, more memories are coming out. We actually get a lot about Loser in this episode. To say his name, so I remember that his name is actually Julian, and his wife is Sophia, or Sophie, I believe it was, who unfortunately turns into like this crazy like at first I thought it was just like she was like some crazy tendril type thing, and then when she was like in this monster form, it's almost like a body, but it's just like the muscles. That's kind of what it looked like, but they were just giant. So and obviously they started off as like tentacles. So unfortunately, she becomes like this crazy creature. We find out that Seameyer is actually completely alive, and he's been inside of Dimension W, but apparently his arm, as well as basically the Genesis, which is like the golden coil, has been lost in some, I guess, interdimensional thing. It was very confusing. It was like it got lost. He's in another dimension, but this thing somehow got lost in between dimensions, but there's still an answer because Kyoma actually got teleported because he, with his insane super strength, ripped the freaking thing apart. And so he was actually teleported out for whatever reason. Julian was actually teleported as well, but for him, he got really messed up during the result. And Seameyer and Sophie were actually teleported as well. And Seameyer's arm got split off, but he was taken out and kind of kept protected in this other form of, the chunk that was taken off. So some crazy stuff for sure. Very surprising how that played out. We actually did get an answer for Luai, and how he's able to go through the different bodies. And I mentioned it's probably that he is controlling the different bodies from a certain location, or that maybe another body is like the main body. Because I didn't realize that he had two bodies functioning at one time. I thought that was his main body, and then even when the other body came in, I was like, okay, so he's with them and he wants to protect them. And it's like, nope, he was actually inside this other robot as well. Like both robots had just another Y in there. So we find out that he's actually back home, totally safe, like no issues whatsoever. But he does mention that if he gets too consciously or even subconsciously involved within a certain body, it's a lot harder for him to kind of detach from that specific unit. So I thought that was an interesting concept, and they didn't take it so far as it could kill him, because he mentioned he killed himself. So I don't know if that's like if he does it himself, then it's a trigger to get him out of that body, or if someone else does it, it would kill him. But he does mention that his brother is basically, Prince Alva is the only person who's technically allowed to do terminations. So I guess it wouldn't have killed him anyway, but he didn't want to be like trapped in that body and like kind of experience that process and going through it, because he can consciously see what's going on with himself. So that was a very interesting little piece. They do wake everybody else up because, of course, Kyoma gives them the answer. Like, there's this little needle basically behind everybody's ears. So everybody's up now. They're all going for the coil. Pretty much, the main people we would expect are the ones that actually end up going in, because we have Cassidy and Sancho's kind of go in, and hopefully his name is Sancho's. I don't really remember his too well, but I remember Cassidy. And he was like, I don't know, I guess he's a robot, because I'm pretty sure he was just like, had like just jets shooting out of his feet, unless he had like something on his legs, but it looked like she was just flying on top of him. And so unfortunately they don't get too much, because I was kind of hoping to get a cool fight scene, but ultimately it was like 2 seconds long, it felt like, and they destroy one, like the twins destroy one of the robots, and then Kyoma gets through, Mira gets through, Salva and Lashta, they all get through, and then that's pretty much it. And then it's like, oh well, that sucks. I was kind of hoping for a really big fight scene. We don't actually get to see Loser fight either, although I'm really glad that he survived, because they actually end it, and he apparently, like, he basically mentions like he just lasted longer, like the superhero guy, whatever his name was. He mentions that basically his coil just didn't, he couldn't last as long. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I do wish we got to see them fight, because I would love to see Loser actually in a full-on battle, because we've only had like little things, like when he was first introduced and he's like skating and stuff and jumping over people and just moving around really fast, but not like a true fight. And I was hoping that we get to see that, and then it starts, and it's like, oh, they skipped over the whole fight scene. But fortunately, he did win, and he shows everyone the memory about exactly what happened with all the people and them um, using Genesis as a way to actually create a teleportation device. And basically, Seameyer lost his mind because it was deemed dangerous. Oh, well, deemed dangerous. It was deemed dangerous. And so they took everything from him, and basically that's when he snapped, because it's like he was, trying to get there, which we find out he actually had the code for it, or, he had already cracked the code to do it anyway. He just needed the facility to basically, kind of fine tune it and get everything 100%. So he goes through, he loses his freaking mind. I don't know how he managed to get everyone in these tubes, because in the other episode when Julian was like, we may or may not, he was like deciding whether or not they'd work with him. It seemed like the only other people that were on Seameyer's side were just other scientists, so I wouldn't think they would turn on everyone else just to kill them, but he kind of did say, like, we'll kill you anyway if you guys don't work with us, so maybe they did, but he was just, like, blowing people up. In a way, he was kind of blowing them up, because the glass would crack and then just blood would spill. So they're testing on all these people. Julian, we find out, was actually hurt before the explosion, because I just assumed when they were talking about all the teleportation stuff and how, the fact that it worked is the only reason Julian was alive and stuff. I was like, okay. So during all that craziness, he really got messed up, but it was actually just the robot, which is probably, oddly enough, the most gruesome thing they've done in the show. They have the robot like crush both his arms. I was like, that was pretty crazy, because I just always thought, oh, he was caught in whatever happened and that's why his body was messed up, but it was just flat out this thing like crushed everything in his arms. I think it was like kind of like straight at the elbow, pretty much. So that's pretty much his whole arm, and I thought that was pretty crazy. So that was how that turned out. They didn't show anything with his legs, so I'll just assume that that was from the explosion. But it was pretty interesting getting, a couple more answers. We still have Kyoma, who needs to search just a little bit deeper for the answers, and he had a little moment where he was kind of losing it a bit, but ultimately it got so crazy he kind of had to get snapped out of it. So now we have what I'm assuming is actually going to be Loser's fight against, unfortunately, this transformed version of his wife. And I think based on the way they did it and how I mentioned it kind of looks like a body, it kind of looked like a body without a head. Maybe that's, because it's, this interdimensional thing, it's an easy possibility. But maybe those are like the parts of all the other people that weren't completely teleported, and because of how crazy things got, it's still a mystery, of course, as to how Seameyer was teleported and his arm got chopped off, but he's totally fine. And then Sophie, who was pretty much right next to him, like they don't show exactly where everyone is, and he was moving, or he was like standing in a different area, I guess, so they weren't like right next to each other. But it's still a pretty big mystery as to how she went through like this insane transformation, but his arm came off, and then other than that, he's like totally fine. And he even had like a little projector thing that worked through dimensions, which I thought was interesting. But he seems totally fine, and then she comes out as like this crazy monster, which he had control over. What could get released, like when he dropped the little teleporting or the projector, and then he was like, "Oh, you think I'd let her off the hook after what she did?" And he basically released her, like, I have this control, which I guess makes sense because he was the one that was the sphere anyway. So it makes sense that he'd have this control, but he can hold on to certain things, and apparently there's not that much to hold on to, because we saw where he was, and it was like just this tiny chunk of the building that he was really in. But I'm very excited for this next episode, which, like I said, if it's not the finale, it's got to be episode 13. That's going to be the last one for the season, unfortunately, but definitely ramping up. It's crazy that, I guess because I started watching it when it was already like 7 episodes in, so it feels like it's hardly even been on for me because I watched all the episodes in like one weekend. But definitely really good. I'm definitely excited to see how close we are to the end of this first season, which I do believe we're very close because of just how things are kind of going. And I'm excited to see what they do with it. I'm curious to get the answer. I'm very curious to find out a little bit more about Mira and whether or not she really does have certain extra components inside of her that may or may not be related to Kyoma's fiance. So I'm definitely looking forward to what answers we're going to be getting. Every episode, Kyoma's like, oh, I remember that. And it's like, he remembers a little bit more at each episode. And basically, we're at the final piece. Like, everything's pretty much been spelled out for us, except for how Sophie transformed. And that was basically introduced at the end of the episode. So there's really only one answer left. And it's, what happened to Genesis. Like, he ripped it open and he was teleported out. So I don't know if maybe he's there, or I for a second I thought that they were gonna say that he was like kind of split and he's in another dimension as well, which I thought would have been pretty interesting. But he ripped this thing open. It caused it was like the official destruction that was like the big deal. So I don't really know what to expect as far as a final answer. It's obviously in whatever this lost place is, and I don't know if it's gonna be something really weird, like it's literally in his mind, but it can only be reached because they're so close to the source of where it happened, or something weird like that. But I'm definitely looking forward to I'm assuming next 2 episodes. If the next one isn't the final episode, it certainly could be. They could do an awesome action scene in the beginning, and then final answers at the end. But I feel like they're gonna do the fight and maybe like one little answer, and then they'll actually resolve it in episode 13. I just feel like it would be too much to kind of put there. Hopefully it is too much, because I would love to see a nice really big fight scene, because we haven't had it. And it's clear that this anime has like amazingly powerful characters, but we haven't had like just an epic fight scene. We haven't had one, and I feel like we kind of need that for this show, because they have these characters. Like, our main character is inexplicably superhuman. He has super strength. I can't think of his buddy's name right now, but like in the episode when they were at Lake Yasugami, and he kicks a guy 3 stories out of a window and he just landed on his feet. So they have these characters that could be in like most other action anime. They would have like crazy epic fight scenes and stuff. So I'm hoping we actually get that in this next episode. We see a lot of people taking on this deformed version of Sophie, and maybe we'll get a couple more answers, because one thing that was pretty interesting is they kind of have Ellie see her mother in this episode, which I thought was pretty interesting, and she actually says mama. And I feel like there's still a little bit there, because based on everything that happened and how Julian was kind of caught in this explosion, which they still don't explain exactly what happened to him and his legs, and that's why I just assume it was during the teleportation stuff. That's kind of what got rid of his legs, maybe, and his arms were already like completely destroyed. So there's still the question as to how he even survived that situation. Maybe it's the other scientists that weren't killed during the experiments. They're trying to get teleported by Seameyer. But there's still that little question. But there's some stuff that I feel like if they don't answer this season, then of course they'll be saving it for season 2. Hopefully, if we actually get one, which I would really like to see. But definitely looking forward to the next episode. I really do hope it's an action scene, but I don't think I'll be disappointed regardless. It'll at least be some sort of action scene. And despite how quickly they might be able to destroy the robots, or at least get past them, I don't see them really doing that with Sophie and this giant, monstrous form that she's in. So I don't see that being just like, oh, it's just a quickie battle, no big deal. So definitely looking forward to a nice full-on fight scene in this next episode. But of course, definitely want to know what you guys thought about this one. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And like I said, I'm pretty sure we are close to the end. And there is one last giant question, and that is, where is Genesis, this crazy, amazingly powerful golden coil, which they also kind of mentioned that the first 5 numbers are actually directly tied to Genesis as well. So I thought that was interesting, because I just assumed they were all just kind of the same, but they made numbers as a way to kind of coexist with Genesis, with the golden coil. So I definitely want to know what you guys think the answer is going to be. Where is Genesis? Like, what happened to it? Because all I can think of is he ripped it open, and I'm assuming it's going to be some weird sort of vortex thing. He got teleported, so maybe they're going to introduce like another dimension or something crazy like that. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they do, but I feel like if it's lost and it's not in our dimension or dimension W, then it would have to be somewhere in between, if it's not literally like in his mind or something weird like that, and it, like I said, can only be released once he remembers, and it makes the possibility, you know, physical or something weird like that, which for this show oddly makes sense because it's interdimensional stuff. It could, any answer almost works, oddly enough. So definitely want to know your speculations and, of course, what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.